Hey, it's Jen for Tested. I've got something really cool to share with you today. I'm really excited about this one. So I've been obsessed with window signs, like vintage painted window signs. Like, think they look so awesome, but I always thought the process was really out of reach because it's like expensive materials and you have to have this really amazing hand at like lettering and all this stuff and gilding, and it just seemed really complicated. But I found a way. As you can see, I found a way to replicate this using very inexpensive materials and a pretty simple process. So basically, I am taking a vector design in the computer, I'm scoring it onto a piece of acrylic using a laser cutter, and then I'm applying layers of paint one by one by removing the masking material and using that as my guide for where to apply the color. It's kind of like screen printing. It's almost like the screen printing process where wherever you want the paint or the ink to go, you're creating a mask around that shape. And as you remove one layer of mask, you can apply another one and apply another layer of color. So there's a lot of order of operations, but the materials are so accessible. This is like clear acrylic, acrylic paint, spray paint, some imitation gold leaf that I found online. This is totally something that you can do at home, and I'm going to go through the entire process from start to finish to show you how I figured this out. I did a bunch of tests, as I usually do, especially for a new process, and I tried a variety of different paints, different types of adhesive for the gilding, and a couple of different steps, like processes of how to get the best effect. So I did a bunch of little samples here and tested out some different paint colors. I also tried a couple of different kinds of gilding adhesive, and I have all my little samples here. So you can see some of the little test pieces that I made. They're so fun. And the finished look, I think, is pretty convincing. It looks a lot like what you would see on a storefront window. So the general idea is that I'm working on the back side of the material. So the acrylic is clear. If I score the design on the back, I can then apply all of my layers and I get this nice glossy finish on the front. So it doesn't look like it was painted. It doesn't have that surface texture. I am using cast acrylic. That's really important for this. It's sometimes hard to tell the difference between them, but you can usually differentiate because cast acrylic will have a paper masking on it, whereas extruded acrylic will have that clear or blue kind of film. That's what you'll see more so at like hardware stores. You may have to order cast acrylic online. It also has a slightly higher melting point. So when you're applying those lines to the material, it's not gonna burn away as much, and it's gonna give you a much crisper line. I think I've mostly mastered this technique, and I want to do a bigger sign today and show you how I did this entire process from start to finish of laying out the vectors to laser cutting, painting, the whole process so that you can try this at home. All right, so I am set up here in Adobe Illustrator, but you can use any vector software, Inkscape or Corel, anything that you can manipulate vectors in. It is important to be able to edit your shapes and kind of get the right stroke weights and things like that, because we have to consider the finishing process of how we're actually going to be creating this thing. And what I mean by that is when we score the lines with the laser, there is a laser kerf, which is sort of the thickness of the laser beam itself, which is going to burn away some of that masking material. So we have to take that into account. And we also don't want to be driving ourselves crazy by peeling off tiny little like spider web thin lines and things like that. So you'll see as I go through this, I'm going to be adding a little bit of a sort of beefy line around the edges of things to make my life easier when I go to actually paint this thing. So I've got a layout set out here with a image. I just made a composite sort of graphic of this saw blade here and a couple little ornaments. And the main thing I'm going to be working with here is the text. So the text will be kind of manipulated so that I can get kind of a fun vintage looking window sign. So I have my text layers here. I've got a couple different fonts, and I'm going to create a shape which will basically provide an envelope, essentially, for, it's called an envelope in Illustrator, for the shapes to kind of be distorted. And I'll show you what this means in a second. So I'm gonna go and draw a box like this, and we'll make that a different color just so it's easy to see, and lower the opacity. And then I'm gonna bring let's bring these to the front. I'm gonna bring my text over here. And I'm just arranging the letters so that they fit into the shape that I've created. Now the next thing I want to do is define the outer shape that each of these text blocks is going to take. And what I mean by that is right now the box around the text is essentially a rectangle. If I were to draw around this, it's a rectangle. But I want to give it a little bit more movement. I wanted to have that kind of sprawling vintage sign sweep. And when this is all gilded, it's going to look really cool. So I'm looking to create this rectangle. I want to change it into something that's a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to take the top shape here, and I'm going to go ahead and grab a brush, and let's make that a different color. And I'm playing around a little bit with the lines here because I want to get enough movement that it's going to change the shape of the letters. And you can use a combination here. I'm using a combination of the brush tool, paintbrush tool, and also the pen tool. You can use the pen to manipulate the nodes after you've drawn something with the paintbrush. I just like to draw with the paintbrush because it's a little more natural and intuitive. Typically I would do this using a tablet instead of just freehanding with my trackpad, but for the sake of today, we're just gonna demo this as is. All right, so let's edit these nodes just a little bit. I'm gonna change the curvature here just a touch. So as you can see with these little Bezier handles, I can manipulate the curves. I can click on individual nodes and drag them around. So I'm just using those to kind of adjust the flow of this. I'm also going to, and I'm also missing one little barrier here. So let's add one more line. Let's give this a try. What I'm going to do now is take these lines that I've drawn and use them to cut out of this larger shape. So I'll expand these. So expand appearance. Looks like we missed one. So expand appearance, and then I'm going to shift click and grab that rectangle and use the Pathfinder palette over here with the minus front tool. And you'll see that it's basically subtracted those lines out of the larger rectangle. So I'm gonna delete these two extra pieces here. And what I'm left with are 4 separate kind of swoosh shapes. Now I'm gonna ungroup these. So now they're individual. And here's where things start to get fancy. I'm gonna drag each of my text layers so that it fits inside of the corresponding rectangle, or no longer a rectangle. And another thing I can do here is to adjust this so that the sort of flow, the curvature of the text will match the shape that I've got here. And an easy way to do that is just to actually grab the path that I've created. So if I zoom in here, we're going to copy that. I'm going to switch it to an outline. And I'm just going to cut out this one little section. So you can see now I've got a line that matches the bottom of this. Now here's the first cool trick that I'll show you. If I grab this text here, I'm going to copy this. And then inside the type tool, there is a tool called Type on a Path. So we'll activate that. And if I click on that curvy path that I drew, you can see now the text that it fills in is going to follow that curve. So if I paste the word that I just typed, we'll maybe need to make it a bit smaller. There we go, there's that E. Now I can get rid of the back layer. So now you see we've got measure curving along the bottom of that. And all I'm doing here is adjusting the nodes to come a little bit closer to the shape that the word is taking. I can also go in and adjust that path that the text is following. I can also go ahead and adjust the curvature of that. And you can see as I drag these little nodes, it will change the way that the letters are flowing. So here's the next cool trick for how to manipulate this and make it look really awesome. I'm going to click on the text. I want to drop it behind the swoosh that I've created. And now I'm using a tool called the Envelope Distort. And the best I can understand this is the shape that I've created on top is the envelope that the other shape is going to fit into. So watch how this works. I'm going to select both the text and the shape. So I've got just those two selected. Now I'm going to Object, Envelope Distort, Make with Top Object. And if we bring this back to the front, let's change the color so we can see it. You can see that now my text is not only sort of swooshing, but it's also transforming the sort of scale and giving you more of a perspective. So it's as if the shape is sort of waving forwards and backwards in space, if that makes sense. It looks better, I think, than just doing kind of wavy tests like Microsoft Word art text. This is a step above that, I think. So we've got the word measure. That looks good. And let's go for the next one. So you get the idea of how this works. Process is create a path from your curvy shape, apply the text to that path that will get the curviness, that will get the text to bend, and then we're using the Envelope Distort tool to manipulate the text a little bit further to get that kind of shifting perspective wavy effect. Another thing that I'm thinking about as I do this is all of the layers that I'm going to apply paint and gold leaf to. So thinking about the order of operations, I will do the black outlines around each of the letters first, then I will fill in with a layer of white, a layer of red, each time removing a level of masking, and then finally I'll do the gold leaf at the back. So as I'm thinking about the way that each layer will be applied, I want to make sure that the layers in my software and in my design will match up with that. It's helpful for me to kind of create like a paint by number almost in Illustrator. So I'm making the shapes the actual color that I plan on it being at the end. And I can follow that later when I need to figure out which layers of the mask to remove. I think that is a finished graphic. So this is what it's going to look like, hopefully, when I'm finished with it. But I need to export all of this into format that the laser can read and know what to do with all of these shapes. I just did a test on our laser cutter here at the tested office. We have a Trotec Speedy 300. It's about 100-120 watt laser. So it's very fast and it's very powerful. And what I did was run a few different speed and power settings to test how deep the score is going to go through this, this contact sheet. So what I'm looking for is a very, very thin line. So I want to get focus super sharp. I want to make sure that the score line is going through the contact film so that I can separate each of the sections. So when I go to weed out each of these little details, the paper is fully cut through. But I don't want to cut too far into the actual acrylic, because then the paint is going to have a sort of this little channel that it can run into, and it can give you some inconsistency. So basically the highest speed and the lowest power setting that you can manage that will cut through the paper but not cut all the way into the acrylic. So I just set up a couple different tests with some fine detail. I threw a different color on each of them, so the laser will use different settings. And I found that this one, which is actually the fastest speed and the lowest setting, works for what I need. So I'm going to use those settings and cut the actual design that I created. It's done. All right. It doesn't look like much now, but this came out really well. It went so fast. And the score lines, like the kerf on that laser is so sharp. This is gonna look fantastic when it's got paint on it. Now, the process for removing the masking is probably the most difficult part, because the entire color scheme is based on the order of operations of applying one thing after another after another. And once you remove a piece of the masking, you cannot put it back. So it's very much like a paint by number. I'm going to open up the original design to see where all my color mapping is, and then figure out my plan of attack in terms of which colors to apply first. This is the most complex to kind of wrap your brain around, because you have to think about the fact that you're viewing this thing from the other side of the material. So what you're going to see, the layers that are going to be applied first will be visible on the front. I'm also thinking about, as much as you can pick paints that are really opaque and do lots and lots of coats, for a piece that has some transparency to it, you are still going to be able to see some color through the next layer, essentially. So I want to make sure that I'm applying my paint from dark to light, essentially. So I'm going to start off with the layers that are black, remove all the masking for those and paint them. That way, when I apply paint for the red and the white layers, those will have masking on them when I paint the black, as opposed to the other way around, because then you'd see the black through the other layers. The very last part will be applying the gold leaf, and I'll show you how we do that. I have found that works best for this method, because when you go to remove the masking around the gold leaf, it tends to want to pull up the edges. Typically, when I've seen this done on glass, when people are doing this professionally, I think the gold leaf generally goes on first, so it's in your foreground. But for this process, using this material, that seems to be the way that works best. You'll see I've got a variety of different brushes out. I tried all different kinds of paints and adhesives. I tested everything out so that you don't have to, and I'll give you my recommendations once we get to painting on which materials actually work best for this process. I have a color map up of my design. I've mirrored it so that what I'm seeing on screen matches what I'm seeing here, and I'm going to attack this with my weeding tool. This is just a little very sharp pick. If you look for vinyl graphics tools or even dental tools, you'll find sets of these. This one came with some tweezers, which are very helpful, and another type of scraper. But basically, I'll just go in very carefully. I don't want to scratch the acrylic, so I'm really just going to pierce the masking and then gently peel back each section. And I'm going to start off with the black. So it's going to be one big piece. And we'll just go ahead and dive right in. Black, white, black, white. Got it. So satisfying. Oh yeah, I was like, I could do this all day long.
Oh, that stays, right?
That one's gonna be white. It's like the...
I see, it's multiple passes.
Yeah, that's my...
Dude.
Yeah. I just finished weeding the first layer. Talk about oddly satisfying. Oh my gosh, removing all those pieces and like, not completely one pass, but almost one pass, like pulling all the little insides of the letters out. I could do this all day. I say that, I probably couldn't, but it is really, really enjoyable. And I think that's all of the stuff for the black layer. So I'm gonna prep my workspace and spray paint on that coat of paint. I have found, before I mask up, I tried a whole bunch of different black color options on my sample pieces. And I found that this Rust-Oleum Painter's Touch in the satin Canyon black color is a really rich, dark black. It's not the most opaque, you will need a couple of coats, but it is the richest black that I found of the black spray paint that I had on hand. I also tried brush-on paint, roll-on paint. This was the best option for a uniform coat and getting like a really, really saturated dark black that makes the gold leaf pop. So Canyon black, Rust-Oleum. I'm gonna go ahead and put that on and I'll see you on the other side of the spray paint. Okay, just taking a look at this coat of spray paint. It looks It looks pretty dry. I have made the mistake on several of my tests where I got impatient and I tried to peel it to pull off the masking before the paint was completely dry. Don't do it. You will ruin all of that hard work. Just be patient, wait for the paint to dry, and very carefully peel off the layer once it is completely set. Come on, one piece, you can do it. Yes, so satisfying. How's it looking? Oh yeah, it's definitely starting to seep through a little bit. I can see where the masking is starting to get a little bit of seep through, which is why I was covering other layers. But I think, ooh, and I see we got some of the black paint came off here, so I'll have to touch that up. I think it's looking pretty good though. And I want to make sure not to put my hand anywhere that I'm going to smudge paint. All right, I've got all my paint applied, and I did peel off the front layer so that I could take a peek. I'm going to wait to show you though until it's finished. The next and final step is the gold leafing. And I do this last because when I've applied the gold leaf and then had other layers of masking to remove, which you'll see when I take off the full backing, it does tend to want to peel up around the edges. So I usually try to save that towards the end when the least amount of masking is remaining as possible. So I'm going to pull out all the areas where I want to gold leaf and then apply an adhesive that will allow the gold leaf tissue to stick to the back. And if you've never used gold leaf before, this is like such an enjoyable thing to work with. And it's actually fairly affordable. So this is imitation gold leaf. You can buy actual real gold leaf in like 18 karat and 24 karat. And it is made of real gold. And this stuff is very inexpensive. I think I bought 100 sheets for maybe 10 or 15 bucks. So you can find this online. It's tissue thin. I mean, really, really thin. If you walk past quickly, this will flutter around. And basically, we just want to get a thin layer of adhesive. It's going to be a clear, very liquid coat. And I've tried a couple of different adhesives for this. Now, typically when professionals do this on glass, they use an adhesive called sizing, which in their case is made out of gelatin. So it's like animal fats, and you would dissolve that into a solution and then use that to brush on the window. They're also usually taking the glass and applying the gold leaf first, and then they use like a brush or a chisel or various different tools to kind of scrape off the excess, which you can do with glass, but you can't really do that on acrylic because it scratches so easily. So I am using a different kind of adhesive. I haven't actually tried the gelatin size on the acrylic. It may be an option. But of the things that I tested, I tried this water-based gilding adhesive. So this is like a concentrate that you mix with water and get your solution from there. I also happen to have some of this, it's called Stick. It's made by Stuart Semple. And it's basically just an adhesive for pigments to apply like loose pigments, but it is very thin, so it's like thinner than milk. And I found this to be the right consistency. It dries perfectly clear, and it also dries quickly, which was my major complaint about this stuff, is that it takes a really long time to set up. So you have to wait like at least 30 minutes to apply your leaf, whereas this is dry in about 10. So I'm gonna go with the Stick solution. I'm sure there are other better options. I haven't tried every adhesive out there, so let me know if you find something that works better for this process. I will keep testing them myself, but For now, we're gonna go ahead and use the stick, and then I'll go ahead and apply the gold leaf. I have applied some of this stick adhesive. I can tell that it's dry because it's clear, and I'm not seeing any pooling in places, which is good. So I can go ahead and start applying my gold leaf. Now, there's a lot of intricacies to this process. I will say as a disclaimer, I am not an expert. I just watched a bunch of YouTube videos, so I have a lot to learn. I'm sure my technique is lacking, but we'll do a whole other video on the gold leafing process, so check that out. And also, this is an ongoing journey for me to learn about the proper way to do this. But here's the first piece. All the gold leaf is on. You haven't seen it yet. I've taken a peek and I checked to make sure that there's no little holes anywhere. I patched any of those. I've just been applying it with a brush and like burnishing it down with my finger because everything else I tried left streaks and like kind of scratches. So just the fingertips to burnish it down. The very last step is, well, I suppose I could clear coat it, but I'm gonna go ahead and peel the back off. The final layer of masking. This is the moment of truth. And this worked on my mini prototypes, but I haven't done a piece this large, so your guess is as good as mine as to whether this will be a success. But I'm gonna very, very carefully peel off that layer of mask and hopefully not any of the gold leaf. We'll see how it turns out. And there's a significant amount of gold leaf on the front, which hopefully is not stuck. Okay, okay. Oh, you know what I did that was smart? I'm so smart. I added a border around everything except for these little flourishes so that when I peeled and the gold leaf came up on the edges, it wouldn't affect the finished piece because I'm so smart. Learning from your mistakes and adjusting. Actually, I forgot that I did that. So all of the gold edges, except for on these little curly cues, all have a border to prevent that from happening. Yeah, see, look, it's peeling up there, but it's okay because it's behind the black. This is it. This is the moment of truth. I'm so nervous. It's probably not going to be perfect because this is my first large attempt, but let's see what it looks like. Should I reveal to myself at the same time? Okay, ready? It looks pretty good. Oh, I missed some masking, obviously, over here. I think it looks pretty good though. Yeah, there's definitely a couple areas where there was a little mistake, a little bleeding of paint. Yeah, but I think for a first attempt at a totally invented process, this came out pretty cool. We'll get some nice close-up beauty shots so you can see this in all of its glory, but I am thrilled with the potential of this process. I think there's still a little bit of ironing out of the details, but I hope that you have enjoyed this and maybe we'll give this a try. This is definitely, you know, a process I kind of made up for acrylic with laser cutting. So let me know if you have any other ideas or suggestions on how to do this better, different materials. And yeah, how cool is that? Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.